everyone, and welcome to Rhapsody PR's Behind the Lens Crafting Magic panel. I'm Jana Davidoff, CEO of Rhapsody PR, and though we can't wait to be with you in person, we're so thrilled that we could bring you this panel virtually. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank Eddie, Laura, Adam, and the entire Comic-Con team for finding a way to bring you wonderful fans out there a Comic-Con experience during these crazy times. I'm now going to throw it over to Alex Beck from my team, who will introduce our wonderful moderator and talented panelists. Take it away, Alex.
Thank you, Jana. Panelists, feel free to wave at the camera when you hear your name. First, the multi-award winning cinematographer known for his work on Slumdog Millionaire, Guns Akimbo, Babenco, Tell Me When I Die, and The Spanish Princess, please welcome Stefan Ciupek.
Woo!
Next, the production designer of The Flight Attendant, Miss Fletcher, and The Kid, please welcome Sara K White.
Yay! Ready?
Next, the editor of Van Helsing, Season 5 and Warrior Nun, please welcome Christopher A. Smith. Next, the music supervisor on Power Book 2 Ghost and The Shy, please welcome Derryck Big Tank Thornton.
Hey everybody, happy to be here.
Next, the multi-award winning cinematographer of The Reckoning, Doctor Who, and I Hate Susie, please welcome Luke Bryant.
Woo!
Hey guys, nice to meet you all.
And last but certainly not least, the Emmy Award nominated art director and production designer for his work on Avatar, Spartacus, Guns Akimbo, and Sweet Tooth, please welcome Nick Bassett.
Hey.
Now, our moderator, you'll recognize him as Axel Miller on the show Van Helsing, on which he also serves as co-producer and co-director. Please welcome John Scarfe.
Yay!
Hi, everybody. I'm thrilled to be here with all these incredible behind the camera artists today who've all come together to discuss the art of storytelling in all its various forms. So let's get started. I think the first question we got is for Chris.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of the editors on the final season of SYFY's Van Helsing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how you first got involved with the show and what some of the initial conversations you had with showrunner Jonathan Lloyd Walker were like?
With Walker, I got into the show. I was asked because I'd worked on a show called The Order, and some of the producers on that produce Van Helsing, and they came to me and said, would you be interested in doing our first block of the first season, which is being shot in Bratislava, Slovakia? And you'd go there for a month, and that interested me. I'd seen the show before. I have friends who are actors on the show, so I was like, that would be a pretty cool idea. I mean, I think it'd be a fun thing to do. When I heard a little bit more of what the idea was, I was pretty sold. So yeah, that's kind of how that came. And to be honest, like Jonathan Walker and I, we, because it's the 5th season, you kind of know what the style is already. You've kind of seen how it's gone. I watched the entire 4th season and the first episode of the 1st season just to kind of see it, kind of how it played out. So I kind of had an idea of the style already. So him and I didn't really talk till towards the end of shooting, and it was just a quick hello and some details of some things, but it was a pretty everyone kind of knew what they were doing, and we just kind of went. I actually, with you, John, directing that block of 3 episodes, we had talked a lot about the show when we were there, which was nice.
Probably
so,
talked
yeah.
more than John Walker do.
Yeah, I always thought it was
panic
funny.
to subside.
Yeah, exactly right. So it was kind of cool that way. And on a show that's established and been successful, there's just not a lot of conversation in that regard that needs to happen, because you're just continuing all the great work that people before you have done. So yeah.
Oh, right on. Sara, how did you first get involved in HBO Max's The Flight Attendant, and what about reading the scripts got you the most excited about joining up with that project?
Sure. So I got attached to that project because of a director that I worked with before, Susanna Fogel, who actually, small connection, Nick also was on that project, A Pilot for the Wilds. We had such a great connection on that show, that when she called me up and told me that there was this new series that she was thinking of doing, immediately I was like, tell me more, I want to know. And when she sent me the script, what was immediately really apparent was that we were working in an environment that dealt a lot with the psychological underpinnings of Cassie, the main character's actions, and dealt a lot with her past and trauma, and also was a fun and thrilling caper mystery. So both of those things combined made it feel like it was going to be something that was really exciting to design, and I was going to be able to dig into the characters in a way that was really unique and represent those things in a physical way that was really going to be special and unlike anything I'd had the opportunity to do before. So it was a really exciting opportunity to get, and it was such a pleasure to be able to work with Susanna again on that show.
Oh, so great. A Big Tank.
Hey.
You've got experience in pretty much every aspect of the music industry, or a DJ, a producer, or a composer, and now a music supervisor. Can you tell us a little bit how you got into music supervision?
You know, after doing composing a few shows, a buddy of mine named Jeremy talked to me about becoming a music supervisor, and at the time I wasn't really interested. I was like, because I'm a creative. So I wanted to be creative and continue to do that. And then I took on a show, and I got to see how you were still able to be creative, just differently. You know, you were now finding artists and giving independent artists an opportunity that maybe they wouldn't have had before. And, you know, that it felt a lot like, you know, when I was an A&R at Universal and Geffen, you're kind of finding talent and giving them opportunities to put their music on a show. So that was half of it. And then the other piece that I really thought was amazing was, you know, if you put the right song over the right scene, you can like create magic. So for me, that was like the thing. So I really was trying to juxtapose songs over, you know, I talk about something feeling good, if it was a fight scene or, you know, just different things, just trying to like leave a different mark and different stamp on TV shows that hadn't been done before. And, you know, because of that, I've been able to be extremely successful at it. I love it.
Thank you. The next question is for Luke, about the reckoning. It's set against the backdrop of 17th century England amidst the Great Plague. So naturally it's a period piece, but how did the setting inform your choices of camera and lenses and lighting, and how did it inform the tone of the film?
Yes, I mean, so like you touched on it, the film is set in the mid-1660s, so you've got the backdrop of the plague and all of this kind of madness going on across Europe. And so our initial research with me and Neil, the director, this is not always the case with every film, but we wanted to initially look at rooting everything historically. So we start from a position of, I guess, historical verisimilitude. So you start looking at the painting of the time. So we looked at Vermeer and Rembrandt and Artemisia Gentileschi and Caravaggio, who's a bit earlier, but was still informing a lot of the work that was painted at the time. So we looked at that artwork, and then we realized there was so much from that type of painting, because it lent so heavily into use of shadow and chiaroscuro and mannerism and Baroque painting, that we took all that, and then Neil was basically, he wanted to start looking at films that had worked in that same vein as well. So we ended up shooting the film. We shot Alexa Mini anamorphic with Cooke anamorphic lenses. And I think part of the reason for that is, although it's a horror film, there's also quite a lot of drama there as well. We just felt that the combination with the Cooke anamorphic lenses, the Alexa Mini working well with skin tones, and what was nice about the Cooke anamorphics were they're not quite as heavy an anamorphic lens as you might, if you're watching J.J. Abrams in Star Trek. You turn on the light and the lens flare goes bananas. You've got that kind of madness going on. It's not quite as heavily and inflected a look as that. So we felt that suited the story a little bit more. And then we, in terms of the approach of the lighting, obviously we're talking about a period of time that is very much pre-electricity. So our sources were moonlight, sunlight, and candlelight in effect. So everything became a kind of a complementary trade-off. Especially for all the night interiors and night exteriors, where you'll always see a cool source and a warm source. kind of dotted throughout the image as well. Yeah, and I think I hadn't actually planned on doing quite so much complementary color as it ended up being, but I think it worked out okay eventually.
And were you super strict with yourself, and did you only use those natural sources, or were you using your version, your magically created version of those?
I mean, that's a good question, actually, because we ended up turning up the sensitivity of the camera a little bit so that I could motivate off the practicals directly. So in the film, if you see candle or fire, that's normally what is doing the lighting on the actors, and then we'd normally, when we come in for a close-up, we might soften it off and bring in another source. But generally, we worked with all the practices that we could, so it felt, if you see a candle flicker, the light it throws will flicker as well.
Right. That's awesome. Sara, so in The Flight Attendant, we follow Cassie, who wakes up from a drunken one-night stand with Alex to find him dead. And you've previously said that your set is like a maze through which Cassie, we hope, will reach a better understanding of herself by the end of her journey. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your set design is, in a way, an architectural representation of Cassie's character?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that when we introduce her into the world and we introduce the audience into the world, I wanted to make sure that that set felt very glamorous, and it very much felt like she was entering a world that she would not have access to if she hadn't had access to Alex. And that access she gains through her work as a flight attendant, which is very divorced from the place that she came from. So I wanted to make that set, first off, feel extremely glamorous, extremely exclusive. But then once the unfortunate murder occurs, I took the set, which was originally based on an orthogonal plan, and sort of shattered that set so that when we start seeing her in this moment of trauma, as she's grappling with what's just happened, we're looking at her in a variety of different possible angles and using different surfaces to reflect her from. So we used a lot of glass, we used a lot of high polished materials so that we could reflect her back to herself in a way, and reflect her to the audience so that we could sort of understand her as having these multiple layers and different viewpoints on her own interaction with her past and with the actions that were happening. And we also used elements to sort of obscure her, a lot of moving panels, a lot of like carved elements that we could shoot through that could allow us as an audience to see her either in shadow or broken apart in the frame, and used a bit of refraction as well, and made sure that there were constantly different sight lines that we were able to see her through. Some were big and bold and symmetrical and heavily defined, and some were just like small pieces that you could see glimpses as she passed between wall panels. And that's all a reflection of how she's discovering herself. She's sort of reckoning with a lot of trauma, and the way that she's doing that is trying to figure out how to see herself and how to see her past. And so we wanted to allow the camera and thereby the audience to also see her in those ways.
Wow. That's awesome. Chris, the season finale of Warrior Nun, it throws us more than one plot twist, as Angel Adriel is revealed to be, in fact, demon in disguise. The episode ends with an epic battle between the warrior nuns and Adriel, who has summoned an army of demons to possess the innocent bystanders. How did you go about editing that particular scene, and how much did the character's choreography influence the way you did cut the scene?
I mean, it's a large scene, so it takes a while to even comprehend all the footage that's involved with it and the storytelling you're trying to do. But you kind of follow the choreography of how they're shooting it and how it's kind of designed to play, and then just kind of play with it. It's like painting. You just you want to kind of try all the pieces, see what works, see what makes sense. And then after you kind of get a shell of it, and it's a mixture of the actors and their choreography. I mean, those girls, I mean, they get in there and they kick some ass. Like, it's not all stunt doubles. There are stunt doubles for sure, but it's like they really come and bring it. And it's just about making it look as cool as you can make it, and telling the story. And I mean, impression of the demons coming and that revelation that, oh shit, like everything is not good now, you know, after they have this huge fight. So it was like, and it's a process working with Simon and because he directed that episode, Simon Barry, the showrunner, a lot about just kind of what he dug, and he really just lets me do it, you know, and which I love. The creativity and the freedoms to do that are really important to me, to let me kind of do my thing. And yeah, it was a really fun sequence, but it's always evolving slightly. So, you know, it's cool.
Cool. Let's see here. Nick. So for Netflix's post-apocalyptic series Sweet Tooth, you were charged with conceptualizing and executing the look of the show while shooting in New Zealand. Where did you start with the entire design process of this show, and what are some of the initial conversations that you have with showrunners Jim Mickle and Beth Schwartz?
Yeah, so I actually ended up shooting everything beyond episode 1. So episode 1 was shot in New Zealand a year earlier, I think, even more, maybe a year and a half earlier. It was originally for Hulu and then picked up by Netflix. So I had the comic to work from, the pilot to look at, and then chatted with Jim, and we ended up hitting it off pretty much straight away, which is always a good sign. and talked for hours really, and ended up, I just collected a whole lot of imagery that gave us the chance to kind of refer to an image, talk about it, and kind of find common ground, I guess. So this, unlike a lot of TV shows, the pilot sets up the tone of the show. It did in many ways with lighting and characters and things, but as soon as we hit episode 2, we left the pilot setting and went into the apocalyptic world. So we were then going, and oddly with that show, as it started pre-COVID, the pilot was shot pre-COVID, that this was something no one had kind of considered. But luckily they took a really kind of friendlier tone, I think. I think that was a really smart choice. And that meant that while we were in this kind of so our conversations with Jim started on one side of the pandemic, and then we ended up shooting it almost a mid-pandemic. So it was a really interesting time to make a very, very poignant show, I guess. So yeah, ended up just with multiple images. We had lots of points of reference with films we liked, photographers we liked, and we just really created kind of a whole look. And we were searching for sort of a fairy tale, I guess, approach, and he referred to it as storybook. And in the pilot, he wrote these, he referred to the song by Patsy Cline, Could See the World Through the Eyes of a Child. And I remember that being kind of one of the most, that was the most helpful line, really. It was like, well, if you
Like
could
the
see it through
driving
the eyes of a
factor.
child. Yeah, that just sort of made sense of it, really. And so that was it. That was the beginning of the process. We started concepting straight away. And then the pandemic hit and we all stopped, and we did these calls where we were all Zooming for a long time. So the prep time was quite long in a good way. And that really helped as well. So that was it, really. It was really just getting the spirit of Jim, really, who's pretty much the creator and the brains behind it, and taking the comic and then trying to find a slightly more friendly way to tell a very heavy story, actually.
Because the comics was quite a lot darker?
The comic's really dark, and I actually was quite shocked by how dark it was, actually. You see the pictures pop up and when you research it, and then you read the comic. I read them in individual, each one in a plastic thing, and I took it out and read each volume. And by the end of it, it's an extremely dark story, and we were like, oh, how do we not make this depressing? And that was the challenge, really.
Right on. Big Tank, how did you go about selecting the music for Star's Power Book 2 Ghost?
All right, so Ghost is it came from Power. So what I was trying to do was I wanted this to just sound like, keep the same spine, but also Tyreek's who's Ghost's son, is younger. So, and he's in college. So, you know, it needed a fresher feel to it. So, you know, I met with, you know, my people at Sony, my people at Universal, my people at Warner Chappell, and I just started to just accumulate a ton of music. I was also at the same time doing the SYFY and just finishing up Greenleaf. So my big thing is I don't want any of my shows to sound the same. Like right now I have 8 shows in production. Nobody can sound the same. So you need tons and tons of music. So once I sat down with the creator, usually I like to sit down with like the creatives, whether it be 50 Cent or Courtney on that show, and Lena Waithe on, you know, on the shows I do for her, is just kind of sit down and get like the tone that they're looking for. And then I make folders of just hip hop, sad hip hop, melancholy this, or party scenes, you know, club scenes that, and just different things that I know they would play at a club, they would play at, you know, a college party or somebody's dorm room. And I set these folders up to kind of help the editors out so they don't have to go looking for certain songs and certain things. I'm going to give you the mood and the tone and whatnot. So I'm listening to music 24/7. That's, you know, I got DJ equipment behind me. That's the beautiful part.
That's not a bad gig.
Nah, you know, I mean, literally, it's kind of like A&R. You know, you're listening to music every day, and you want the music to kind of help tell the story. So you got to listen to it, so you know the words. You got to know, you know, kind of what they're talking about, you know, because you want it to kind of lean towards what's going on, unless it's something that just plays far in the background. But if you're going to score a scene with a song, you really want to make sure that, you know, the lyric kind of is not too on the nose, but it tells that story and that emotion as well. So you got to really gather a lot of music and be able to tell the emotion of music and things along those lines. So it's a lot tougher than it sounds. But if you love records, if you love digging in the crates, like I said, I'm a DJ first, then it'll make sense to you, you know, and that's kind of how I approach, you know, all the shows. I heard one of the gentlemen talking about period piece shows. I have 2 now, one called BMF that starts in the 80s. So I had to accumulate a bunch of original 1980 something sounding music, and to really make that show feel like the 80s. You know, so the hip hop has to sound like the 80s, R&B has to sound like the 80s. And another show I have right now called The Spook That Sat by the Door, and that's 1968 is the period piece. So right now, the teams are making a bunch of original sounding music that sounds like 1968, because you only get to license 2-3 songs from that era per episode, depending on what your budget is. So you got to fill that thing out. So if you don't have great relationships with real artists, it gets to be tough. But once you do, and you send them on their way, then they'll send you back a plethora of music to choose from.
Right. Yeah, I'm always blown away by the fact that you can take any given scene with one track on it and have the exact same scene with a different track, and it's a completely different
Feels
scene.
Completely different, exactly.
Completely different.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much power that has. This is a question for Stefan and Nick together. You both worked on Jason Lee Howden's adrenaline-ridden roller coaster of a film, Guns Akimbo, which it's got a lot of car accidents, fight sequences, stunts, visual effects, special effects. Had you dealt with this type of action work before? Or how intense was the collaborative process of finding and executing the look and tone of the film when you're working in this kind of arena?
Maybe I'll start. Nick already was a longer time in the process. When I joined the project, I was prepping in Berlin, and Nick and Jason Lee Howden, the director, they were in New Zealand and already in the process of building the world. And when I kind of read the script, I just thought that I've never seen anything like that. That really was madness, but in a very exciting way, actually. And you know, I mean, Jason had quite a few reference films from the 80s, which he kept, like The Running Man and Terminator 2, and like a lot of classic 1980s action cinema were in his mind when he kind of, you know, wrote the script and was in the process of the film. And you know, then it's all about graphic novel as well. So we felt, Nick and I felt like we have to bring in a lot of colors and this kind of graphic novel design into the film, inject lots of colors and interesting angles and frames. And so we were a good triangle, Nick, Jason, and I, kind of just talking about ideas and kind of inspiring each other with references and tones for the film, actually. And what I realized pretty early on is that that I want to have a very dynamic, we want to have a very dynamic camera in the process. So basically being pretty much from Miles' perspective on his journey, kind of Daniel Radcliffe's journey through this film. And so this then kind of dictated for me the process of having a very agile and fast moving camera and being kind of, centered around him. And yeah, maybe Nick, you also.
I think also one of the things that was really distinctive about the show is we had to shoot it in New Zealand and in Munich, both places that don't really look much like America. I think we were trying to create sort of it was a mythical kind of Chicago-esque type urban setting, but it was not really specific to anywhere. But part of the challenge was trying to make the two countries look cohesive, I guess. We had, we at the art department seemed to have this tiny budget, which was this horrible moment where you take the job and then you look at the budget and go, there's a mistake. There's an accounting error.
We've all been there.
But
I'm to be creative, actually.
It wasn't a mistake, but I remember Stefan saying that he could help out a lot with the lighting, and I think that's a really important thing. Part of the look was that we often found we found good locations. That was the first challenge we actually spent. We rejected a lot of the locations that were offered. I went early back to Munich and scouted more locations because we weren't happy with them. That was the way to get around it. And then Stefan was able to bring in, and we worked a lot together, bringing in lighting to tie everything together. We built very few sets. We built on location a lot. We had to build an apartment out of, I think the budget allowed for 2 walls that my art director said we can afford 2 walls. And so we found a little warehouse space, and it was tough for you, Stefan, because it was on the 2nd floor of an old industrial building with no power. And we built 2 walls. And then I remember asking the art director if we could have some trim on the inside of the door for a shot, looking through the apartment. And he said, there's no budget. There's no money left for it.
You've had both your walls, there's nothing left.
Yeah, so I offered to pay out of my per diem for the work. That makes it sound worse than it was, but it was pretty tough. And but the light, that cohesion was the lighting and the stunt side of it, and everything was mainly up to you, Stefan. But I think that the look of it was really a great combination of what you can do with the help of 2 crafts. Really, I thought that was a big.
What was very helpful that most of the locations Nick was able to give me previous, so we had literally like a proper scale 3D model of the set, and I could start light with colors in the virtual space there, and we could at least for each location define the precise lighting setup. Because we were also so short on time, we didn't really have like a big, like you watch a film and you think, okay, that's like probably $50 million budget and you have 2 or 3 units running along, but it's kind of most of that we had to do together. So this way of preparing and knowing exactly how the film's going to look like in advance and kind of shaping it. Also, like it helped a lot that we shifted many scenes into night, because at night we were able to hide the fact that we are in Munich and Auckland and nowhere close to a big major city, and trying to create our own little Gotham world in a way. So it was very challenging and exciting process.
It was a lot of fun actually, but it was. I just remember that never before have I felt the pinch of a budget and realizing that you really need that cohesion for it to work. Otherwise, one thing will look great, one will look, and it's just trying to tie it all together. And it was just a really great I thought that was a really great result, that it looked like one film due to that real meshing of the two departments.
It's so satisfying, isn't it, when you are manage to pull off the illusion when you don't have the luxury of all the resources in the budget.
It is. It's a cool thing. It's a relief, I guess, in many ways. But yeah,
we got away with it.
You get away with it. Yeah. On to the next one.
Luke, in one scene in The Reckoning, Charlotte Kirk's character, Grace, attempts to escape a group of masked men who accuse her of witchcraft. From flickering lights to total darkness to shifts between high and low angle shots. Can you tell us how you approach shooting this particular scene and why?
Yeah, I mean, with that scene, we initially, there's quite a clear shift in the camera language about halfway through that scene. And we initially wanted to just give the audience a very sense of kind of slow, brooding unease, the sense that something horrific and inevitable is going to happen. So in terms of, I think we've got lightning kind of going into the windows. There are wind effects as well, but it's all relatively controlled, so that when you get to the slightly more explosive action later on in the scene, there's at least a contrast there. And so the initial part of the scene, anytime the camera moves, it's motivated by her movement. So it's all on dolly, it's all on sticks. She moves, the camera moves, and we just generally track with her. I guess it's the kind of thing you see, like David Fincher's the master of this, right? The camera's static, the actors move, and he just moves perfectly with the actors. So we try to use a little bit of that camera language, and then as soon as she goes outside, we start using more strobes. There's a wide shot, which I wish wasn't in the film, because again, we just kind of run out of budget. So we've got a tiny strobe just out of shot, and it's really not lighting as much air as it should. But we just about get away with it. And so she's kind of dipping into complete darkness and then coming out. And again, it's just to heighten that sense of unease, that sense of what's going to happen to her. And then basically she goes back into the cottage. And at that point, all the men that attack her, they all appear. And at that point, we shift into handheld, so that you kind of, there's a slight kinetic jump, but it's not kind of born automaton kind of handheld. It's a bit more informed and a bit more the kind of indie art house sensibility. So there's still a dramatic tension as well as a kinetic tension, but it's not, it's not going bananas.
Right.
And I think we kind of wanted that sense of still keeping it fairly deliberate, but without throwing the camera around, so that the sense of kind of the horrific inevitability that comes, it's in contrast to what we had earlier, which was all very pastoral and bucolic, and she's got a nice life with her husband, and then that all just kind of, it just gets destroyed and taken away from her. And so we've kind of got the strobes that are going off, which are motivating the lightning into the cottage the whole way through. And then at the very end of it, the men that attack her, they set fire to the cottage, the whole thing burns. And I think we shot the whole thing over 3 nights. And we kind of did the interior bits first, and there's a bit of the drama that happens exterior, and then the burning of the cottage. That was a few hours because we're in the middle of nowhere. But when that cottage went up, the heat was just absolutely insane. We had like 4 or 5 cameras rolling on it, and there's a number of cameras. We've kind of hidden the cameras in one's hidden in a barrel close to the fire. It almost melted. It was okay. These kind of things going on. And at one point I was in Video Village and I was looking at the shot going, I wonder if we could have got close, and I stuck my head out of Video Village and almost got my hair singed off. So it was pretty hot. But again, it was just
that if you haven't been around a burning building and then you suddenly are on set and they're burning it for real, it's like 150 feet away and you feel like you're too close. It's incredible.
Yeah, because they kind of made the decision. Obviously we had a good SFX team and most of it was controlled, but because we'd shot everything in the film up until that point in that cottage, and it was a complete thatch roof, and they'd done the full works on it. They just said, let's burn it. So we actually properly burnt the thing. It was obviously all controlled, but everybody was, like you say, we were 100, 150 feet away, and it just went up. And it took a good few hours for the whole thing to go. But you didn't want to, luckily we were in a clearing not too near the forest where we were shooting. And then,
yeah, and then you just wrap and cook marshmallows right after.
Yeah, huge marshmallows.
Sara, you had to literally build an airplane from scratch for this show. How did you go about building the aircraft? What did that involve?
Well, it was It was the whole airline. So that was a pretty amazing experience to really see the entire airline from the small minutia all the way up. But as far as the plane goes, we worked really hard looking across the globe for elements that we could bring in to our set. We were lucky enough to work with a company called Shoot Aviation out of the UK, which we found after weeks of searching fruitlessly in the US, that had some of the higher class elements that we needed, like the seating pods in the first class, so you can take a nice nap when you're flying places. And they had a full galley that they'd cut out of a plane that when we were in prep, I went over and I spent 24 hours going through their plane elements that they had and picking out the pieces that I thought could work for us. And then we brought them back to the States and built out around those elements a set that felt like it could be a little bit new and unique in the way that it offered amenities to the business first clients who always want to have champagne whenever they can. And tried to also bring in a few elements that felt a little bit more residential, because it's sort of Cassie's home. When we meet her and she's in the plane, that's really the space that she feels most comfortable, because she is between places. She's in a world where she doesn't have the responsibilities of her past coming for her, and she's always just a little bit out of the grasp of all of the maybe darker things that surround her life. So we use some residential elements in the lighting and in the flooring to bring that into it as well. And then just put a nice slick gloss on it for all of the branding and the logos and all of the, all the pamphlets that they show everybody to go through the safety protocols and things. It was a full team effort. And then obviously working with VFX to make sure that we branded that plane to give the full effect of the airline. So it was a really fun and exciting process to go from soup to nuts on that.
Was it, I mean, for the sake of ease of filming, was it a much roomier plane than an actual plane?
Yeah, it was a bit. It was a bit roomy. We wanted to make sure that we could dolly down the aisles. So we went with the doorway dolly and we sized the aisles to suit, of course. But we did have a lot of shooting portals. So in the galley, we had to take a Sawzall in and cut out some elements so that we could make sure that if we needed to get in close and tight with our flight attendants while they were digging through the alcohol drawers, we could get in there and get the shots that we needed. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love all those little details when you're like, this.
I just want to say,
we can't fit a camera in here.
I just did a feature and we spent 2 weeks working at Shoot Aviation where you work with Sarah. I have to say I have complete respect for you, because working in that plane, it was, not fun.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, they do a lot of good work with the way they integrate the different lighting and the paneling that they do. So all the sidewalls are unique panels, so you can pop them in and out pretty quickly. Yeah. But designing shots to make them feel exciting and adding lighting so that they can feel dynamic, but also feel real, also on a budget. All of those things, were a bit challenging, but it was exciting. I had to do a bunch of research, unfortunately, going to these different countries and business first. So it was a hard job, but I was able to pull it off.
You guys keep noticing the word budget keeps coming up.
Yeah, and it seems like we're talking about some shows with some significant budgets too. So it's like that word just never goes away. It doesn't really matter how big or small the budget is. You're always under its kind of.
The equation is money plus script.
I don't know if you guys
maybe it works.
I don't know if you guys have the same.
If you don't have ambitions beyond, that everybody here, I think, always has big dreams. So it's hard to cram big dreams in any kind of box that involves money. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the creators seem to forget that the budget is actually a budget. And like sometimes I'll read a script and it'll have like 12 needle drops. I'm like, really? We got $3 million of budget an episode now? You know what I mean? So it's crazy.
Yeah, that is, yeah. Exactly. What show do you think we're working on here? Where is this going to come from?
Right?
What do we? I got a question for Nick. You're both a production designer and an art director. How would you say that your work as an art director helped your work as a production designer?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I in New Zealand we sort of work. That's where I live, and I've started the industry there. We kind of work. It's like the Wild West, really. We kind of just started making films here. There wasn't the same structure as there probably is around other parts of the world. In the States is quite a different system. So I actually ended up just starting. I did design school, then went to running, and then set dressing and standby props, on set, lots of just different roles within the art department, and then ended up. We have a role here called Onset Art Director, which is different than nearly everywhere else in the world. I think the British system has something similar sometimes, and that is the role I did a lot, where we kind of oversaw everything that the art department was doing on set, and was the kind of spokesman for the production designer, I guess, or the face of the production designer on set in many ways when they weren't there. So I would be on set a lot, and that experience was really helpful. Having lots of on-set experience was great. And then when you do something like Avatar, you get given a set to look at. So I was doing some vehicle work, and so it becomes very detailed. So that role as an art director, you become very much like the person who's the most knowledgeable on that particular set. And so that's a helpful thing. And then I think just with production design, then you get that great luxury, I think, of being able to look at the whole project more, and the general project, and work with the likes of Stefan and cinematographers and director, and then that is another level where it's just more, I think that's, to me, more exciting, and then being able to delegate and bring in your crew to help that vision. So I think having done through the onset experience and hands-on, and I've done lots of things, and that is out of necessity in many ways. And New Zealand being kind of a reasonably small industry, it was just how you keep employed, is you just, you do a job and you just keep going, and eventually, hopefully, you get to where you want to be, or where you're best suited, really. And so, yeah, I think it's been a great background for me. It gave me a chance to see how lighting worked on set by being there, and when a prop falls apart on camera, you know what to try and look out for next time, or floating a wall in a set, you realize how long that can take, and when the lighting guys run all their cables through the back of the set, you can't float it, and these things that you just sort of spot from being on set, they definitely help. I think they help you kind of make a more efficient set, and it just helps free up that. To me, I think it's a great. I feel lucky to have had that kind of onset experience.
Onset experience is invaluable in so many departments, just in terms of like what you're talking about, just by troubleshooting, just having seen it all fall apart so many times in the past and knowing what to avoid.
Yeah, the best intentions and the best design can fail in simple ways, really, and it's good to have seen those seen those failures, I guess, and learn from them, or just know go, actually, next time we do that, let's not do it that way.
Right.
Because ultimately you're trying to make the best looking show you can, and you just don't want those moments where it breaks, or you hold up the crew, and it's a lot about that, really. It's about just making sure everything works and is quick. And on TV especially, you just don't get a second chance. It's like often you shoot it, and if it's not quite right, it's like they move on. It's unforgiving. It's brutal. Yeah.
Chris, so much of editing is dictated not only by a grasp of narrative and imagery, but also by performance. can you share an example of a scene that you've edited in which an actor's performance or maybe even the specific dialogue influenced your choices as an editor?
I mean,
I suppose
it's almost always
itself.
Yeah, like it's just you kind of, when you get the scene or the performance dictates almost always how that scene's going to go. At least to me, it depends on, you know, what the scene is, what the intention is, kind of the emotional feeling of it. But you tend to cut and to illustrate certain feelings too over certain lines. You want to go wider because you want to really hit on a line, a particular word, even sometimes to really hit the hollowness or whatever of what they're saying or the scope of what they're trying to say. One that comes to mind just recently is I did a Disney movie for Disney Plus and Disney Channel, a kid's Christmas movie that's coming out at the end of the year. And the young actress in it, Scarlett Estevez, is there's a part where she kind of realizes that her father is remarrying somebody else. And this little actress, she's amazing, but she sits down and you don't want to leave the shot. Even though there's all this coverage to show it, you just don't. You go like, I am going to watch, just see the pain on her face. And I love that stuff when you don't even make my job easy, where I don't even have to really cut anything because it's just that powerful. And the emotion is there. And it was one that just came to mind just now, where it was really moving and a really sweet moment in a movie that's a comedy, right? It's like a Groundhog Day type deal, but it's like this one really heartfelt moment that really brings a heart to the whole show, which was for me was a really cool thing. But yeah, I mean, I love that stuff, and watching performers act, perform, and envelop characters in a way that you just kind of try to show that in the best light. And there's other times where you have to make performance out of stuff, you know, where you're really trying to get a certain thing, where you're dropping lines and cutting things and staying off people, trying to keep something to feel a certain way when you're trying to show a certain side of a certain character or whatnot. So yeah, that stuff all is always there. There's a lot of things you can do in post to really kind of influence how an audience is receiving a story, and it's fun to do for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to what we're talking about music with Big Tank. Was a super humbling experience as an actor, being in the editing room for stretches of time and realizing how much a performance can be altered in one direction or another in the editor's hands, for good and bad. But you could truly completely change the intent of a given scene or fix what an actor was doing if you didn't get quite what you needed. It's kind of extraordinary. They're like, well, as long as you got enough bits and pieces, you can do a lot of things.
It's like when you meet the actors at rap parties or whatever too, and they find out you're the editor or whatever, they're always so, hi,
buddy.
Want a drink, you know, that kind of thing. But they're always curious. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
You're not gonna cut away, right?
Yeah, you're gonna leave me in, right? I'm like, we'll see how many drinks you get. Yeah, exactly. Right. So,
That's funny. We're so lame. Stefan, in season 2 of The Spanish Princess, there's a particularly striking scene in which the regent, Queen Catherine of Aragon, rides into the Battle of Flodden, pregnant and in full armor. It visually encapsulates the character's strength as a mother, a woman, a queen, and a leader. How did you go about shooting that particular scene? And how did you use the camera to enhance the story being told at that particular moment?
So this was probably one of the most challenging scenes that we shot during The Spanish Princess. Generally, the idea was that the camera is staying close to our lead characters and kind of shows the 16th century Tudor England through their strong strong characters, actually. So the idea was, instead of kind of cutting into the battle and, you know, doing a lot of coverage, kind of experiencing the moment when she rides into the battle through her. So we had the idea that we're going to follow her with a high-speed camera on a tracking vehicle. So we kind of literally she was taking us into the battle, and we shot this at 1,000 frames per second. And because we didn't have a time to do that on a TV schedule yet, for the whole battle, only 3 days and no second unit. And so we had like 4 or 5 cameras a main unit. We had to do this was like in our storyboard, we planned it well, but the thing is we didn't have the time to do that. So the plan was kind of, besides getting the three main element shots of a sequence, at the same time, you would kind of get some coverage with the CND camera kind of in the process. So we kind of follow her into the battle in super slow motion. And then she's basically, as she is taken off the horse, we're on a crane on really high perspective, and the camera just floats down towards her as she's kind of then brutally taken off the horse. And within the seamless shot, as the camera kind of goes down, it goes seamless handheld into kind of her experience in the battlefield. So kind of having this, you know, this slow approach into it, and then the brutality of it when she's kind of in the midst of this bloodshed. And like, these were like the 2-3 signature shots of the sequence, which, you know, we planned, and we had lots of challenges to get them done. We used the rig that was used on 1917 to get the camera off the crane while we were doing the setup. So being in an immersive journey.
Oh, you just hand it off and kept going.
Yeah, we just handed off a crane shot that came down from the top, but there was lots of choreography and fight choreography and planning, you know, necessary in order to get this shot. As everybody was kind of scared when we came with the board, Tanya, the director, and me, we came with a storyboard, and the idea of a sequence is kind of, it's not how you do it on television with a tight schedule. We kind of went into and managed, and that was quite an interesting challenge.
What were you using? You were chasing her with a camera when she's on horseback and it's going at 1,000 frames a second.
No, we had a car, we had a tracking vehicle that would kind of go into the battlefield with her, kind of, and then the other one was a 60-foot techno crane that kind of, you know, then kind of came from top perspective down into it. The only problem in the whole thing was that sadly, in the editing process, it was decided that it takes too long, and they wanted to be faster in it. So the whole magic, the beautiful moment of like frozen time and this element, like this painterly image of the camera coming down, was in the end cut. So I have it somewhere on my rushes, but it's not in the episode actually. So this is unfortunately. Happens, you know. We thought we only need those 3 shots to tell a whole scene of the battle, and what they did, they went too quickly into the coverage of the other cameras, and yeah,
right,
it was gone.
They do. The perils of super slow-mo.
I feel your pain. I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Beautiful and so slow.
It's always hard if you're trying to do cinema in a TV world. It's kind of, you know, the pacing has to be there, and then, you know, patience sometimes isn't there. Like, why isn't there a cut? And yeah, we like to kind of, you know, follow with the camera and kind of see the scene unveil through the perspectives and not kind of cut into it. There's another scene which we kind of had a similar approach, the King of Scotland arriving at the castle, and because we had all in one, it was like the inside of the castle we had as a real location. So we kind of led him in on the horse, going through the yard, into the castle, up 1 floor, 2 floors, and we had this whole sequence told in a 3.5 minute Steadicam shot. But again, editing was not patient with that.
Oh yeah,
many other
choices.
You know
what happens when you send them choices.
Yeah.
Next time, no choices.
I got a question for Luke about the Reckoning. So despite its England setting, it was shot entirely in Budapest. What kind of challenges did shooting there throughout the summer present when it came to achieving your desired aesthetic?
I've got quite a boring answer for this, because actually it worked incredibly well. Like I was a little bit worried about, we didn't got a lot of research, and we had looked at the photographs of the topography of Hungarian countryside, and then when we got there, I was kind of blown away how similar bits of Hungary looked to bits of the UK. And in fact, the very first day that we were shooting, we shot one of the final shots of the film, which is this couple on a horse and cart, and they just literally just drive off into the sunset. The cart throws a load of dust. It's all backlit, you know, it's the kind of traditional sunset shot. And it looked completely English. When I saw that, it was like something out of a Constable painting or a Turner painting. I was actually a bit surprised. And then we supplemented that with, we did 3 days at Dartmoor, which is an English national park in the southwest of the country, which is the kind of thing that you would associate with like Wuthering Heights. You know, it's all kind of gorse land and moorland and all that kind of stuff. So we shot a lot of that, but all of the stuff that we shot out the countryside in Hungary, it worked great. And in terms of the set build that we had, we went on to, there's an existing lot there called Falt Studio. And in fact, the week we finished The Witcher, they were in there using the same, it's a standing set that they've got there, which plays as like a kind of medieval courtyards, dungeons, great halls, all this kind of thing. It's all there. And so we had used most of that, and I think we repainted it for The Witcher because they were doing something different. But it was all kind of built and ready to go, and I think that quite a lot of period stuff shoots there. So the kind of the melding and the meshing of the day exterior elements from the UK, which we shot in Hungary, and then all the studio stuff, it kind of worked seamlessly, I think. So.
Oh, that's awesome! And then you get to be in Budapest. So
well, exactly, yeah. Which is right. I've never been there before. So
yeah. Big Tank. Was there a particular song on this season of Showtime Network's The Chi that you were particularly happy to get greenlit?
You know, I mean, we're on like right now, but if I was to say like last season, because we're just at episode 3 right now, so there's still so much music to come. So I'll speak to last year's season. Very first episode, we had a song called "There for You" by an independent artist, and at the time, I didn't even realize that Spotify and Shazam and all those people track TV music. So it was the first time I had like a #1 song for the week. And
oh wow! I didn't know they did that either.
Yeah, now I got a bunch, but I didn't even know that at the time. I got this email, and they wanted to talk about the artist and all these things, and that was the first one. So that was, and the kid ended up getting a record deal.
Oh, that's also, so fantastic!
Off of a television show song, and then on Ghost we had. So on The Chi, the first season I had 4 #1s out of the 10, and on Ghost, the first season I had 7 #1 songs of the week. Yeah, so I feel like I'm in my groove now.
Yeah,
I love the idea of, you know, independent artists being able to break through in that medium as well.
You know, the industry's changed so much that way. When I first, as a producer, like I had Neo signed and I had Janae Aiko signed to me, and I never could get a TV placement. I didn't know why. And it was more because the supervisors and the publishing companies and nobody was really having the people talk to each other.
They're just kind of separate worlds?
Yeah, you know, so since I've worked in a bunch of different places, I make them talk to each other. So now the level of music has been elevated for the TV shows that I'm on, at least, because I'm dealing directly with record companies, and not for just the big records. Anybody can license a big record. That's not really what a music supervisor should be doing, or that shouldn't be how you get your credit. Anybody can go on Billboard or Spotify and go to a playlist and pick big songs. You know, when you can start breaking artists on your TV shows, then you really put your stamp on in the industry. And I really pride myself in trying to do that. So from that guy to the guys that I just got off on Ghost, and the new girl I just found who's got a scene coming up in episode 5 of The Chi that is gonna make people cry. And hopefully that launches her off, because it's an amazing piece of music.
Awesome. What do we got? How are we doing for time? Yeah, we got a couple minutes. Chris, you edited the current season of Van Helsing, the final season, but you did it with John Anktil. So can you? How do you work with another editor to make sure that audiences feel like they're experiencing each episode seamlessly, and that it's not, you know, disjointed or different editing styles?
Yeah. Well, in that particular case, I've known John for a while. He's actually one of my assistants back on another show, a few shows, and so I tell him
what to do.
Yeah, this is how it is, you know. But it was kind of weird with that show, because it's like in our 5th season, so you already kind of know the styles. you want slightly different styles. Every episode has its own style changes anyways, like kind of the idea of the show. And that's why you hire different editors, so you can get a little bit of a different feel on all the episodes, but still having an overall arcing feeling. The other weird thing about that show in particular was that it was the pandemic hit while we just finished shooting the first 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So, you know, we got back from Europe and then everything shut down. And so what ended up happening, because we had those 3 in the can, that I could basically work from home, my home office. And that's what we ended up doing, right? Because we don't want to waste time sitting around for months until God knows when we get back. So it was a different kind of process where you work strictly online, notes, you know, that kind of thing. And then when he started, like, there wasn't a ton of, we talked a little bit where we chime in, see how things were, how was the stuff. I think he watched the cuts, like you try to watch what the other editor has done to see kind of what the feeling is a bit in that regard. But yeah, and then because of that, we were a lot, you know, left on our own a lot more than we say normally would have been. Normally you're in the same office and you just go look at what they're doing and say, that's pretty cool. Like, what are you doing with these kind of shots, or how are we playing with this character or whatever. So yeah, so it was a little different in that regard, but you know, all the talented guys that work on these shows, you just kind of, you know, you set a trail, you say, this is kind of how I'm doing this, and then they follow suit and continue that thread. So
yeah, and that's the beauty of it too, is there is room for everyone to put their own stamp on it, but take the show on a huge veer off in the wrong direction, but
yeah, exactly.
But definitely make it their own to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
Stefan, how did you go about filming a period drama series like stars The Spanish Princess within a modern context?
So for me, first of all, it was very exciting it was my first period drama series, which I've done, and we are shooting in a mix of massive studio builds and on location castles. And so they're very challenging to kind of build this world kind of together. And I looked at a lot of period drama series, and I felt that they're all kind of on the edge of being desaturated and a bit kind of too tightly shot, and, you know, not showing the spaces. So I thought, or me, the production designer and the director, we thought that we would go completely opposite. So shoot this series very kind of wide angle. So we kind of see the spaces. In the studio builds, we always kept the ceilings, so we see the beautiful ornaments on the ceilings, and limit myself in the lighting so I can only go through the windows, making it more natural, and kind of being closer, physically closer to the main characters. And that the actors noticed that immediately, that all of a sudden I was physically much closer to them than they used to on a TV show, because with the wide angle lenses kind of going closer and seeing, even in a close-up, you still see then the surrounding space, because I felt that this kind of should be shown. And the other thing was, instead of going dark and desaturated, kind of injecting Westminster Palace with light and colors, actually. So kind of going the complete opposite, both in the costumes and also the set design and the color grading, the look of it. We kind of went all into colors, but still natural colors. So we kind of followed the idea that there's no other light sources than obviously daylight, the sun, the moon, and maybe, you know, the fireplace inside, enhancing those, but then staying in this full saturation of that and creating a kind of, you know, different look for the show.
I think this would be our last question, probably. Got one for Sara. The Flight Attendant, for the most part, set in New York City, but certain episodes were filmed in countries like Italy and Thailand. Can you tell us a little bit about that whole process of finding locations overseas, and how traveling to those places maybe influenced your design of certain spaces, like the Makara Prince Suite, for example?
Sure, yeah. So we originally were considering, at the very beginning of production, hewing closer to the book, which sets the primary action in Dubai. And so when I first came onto the project, we were considering going there, but for production reasons, we pivoted to Bangkok, and then immediately started conversations with producers over in Bangkok who could assist us and get us going with location scouting and things there. And then I just dove into research as well, trying to find styles that were immediately evocative of the region, and diving into the research around really high-end hotels for the 1% that are going to be in not only Thailand, but also that general region. And we went over there pretty early in the production process for 2 weeks of scouting with our main team members. So our cinematographer, our director, our AD, and all of our producers and showrunners came over, and we just tried to really get a sense of the place and get a sense of what makes it feel unique, and not only just the architectural stylings or the colors, but also just like, you know, it's a warm climate, you know, and it's a warm, humid climate compared to a cold, dry New York winter. And so trying to bring in that feeling in the color tones, bringing it in using greenery and using architectural stylings that are going to be evocative of some of the primary design ideas that are so common in the architecture in that region. So if you're looking at the suite, we brought some of those elements in just with the style of the stonework that we chose, some of the wood tones that we brought in. We also brought in a lot of art that was unique to Thailand, and a lot of the contemporary art were Thai artisans, photographers that we brought in and things like that. And we used a few of the elements, like the ceiling in the main living room space was a Pha Pakong style wood paneling, and that's traditional to Thai building styles. So I really wanted to make sure that you always felt like you were in a new world, because Cassie's in a new world, and that was something that could never be forgotten. And we wanted to make sure that it was really apparent from the beginning, and kept you there the whole time, that you couldn't get used to being in that space and forget that that was set somewhere else. So also having big windows and a view out to Bangkok really helped in that.
Right.
That arena. Yeah.
Not mistaking it.
No, hard to pick that one.
I'm being prompted that there are 3 more questions. So the first one would be for Nick. Sweet Tooth. It's based on the DC Comics series by Jeff Lemire. How much of the production design was inspired by the comics themselves, and how did you use that material in your creative process?
I think it's a good question, actually. The comics were, as I said earlier, they're kind of a dark story, but there's a very charming style and an innocent style to the drawings. And I think people who know the comics will know what I'm talking about. Jeff's style of drawing is quite unique, and it's actually not very typical of a graphic novel, really. He's got his own style. And so I think that kind of whimsical feel, and there's sort of I don't know how to explain it. There's a style to his drawing that we couldn't directly use, but we could definitely be influenced by it. And also, when you're basing something on a graphic novel, I think naturally you start to think of strong framing and those memorable images. So that definitely has an influence. I think it's hard to avoid that influence, actually. Once you've seen imagery, you just want to keep working there as a keyframe kind of artwork and things. To do it on a TV show is tricky, because I think we built 60 set pieces, sets, I think, and we shot for 70 days. So we were always moving. Everything we built, we shot briefly. And so yeah, I guess how did it influence it? It's just trying to find that cohesion of style. And I think his artwork there's a memorable look to it. We were mindful of the comic and mindful of his style, but we had to find our own voice for it. And yeah, it's anything like that. It's the starting point. The story arc is incredible in the comic. It's amazing how far the story goes and how deep that story goes. And Jeff actually says on one And like, there's one part of the comic, if you know it, that's a completely different drawing style. And I was amazed. I think I asked him or Jim, how did he make it look so different? And he said, I got someone else to draw it. And I always thought that was interesting. It was like, someone else just drew that, I was too busy. And I don't know, that sort of free, I guess there's a freestyle that he has that was influential. Yeah, if that makes any sense. But yeah, it was indirectly influential is probably the way to describe it.
Big Tank, across all of the projects that you've been a part of, how often do you feel like you have conversations with the composer?
Ah, man. You know, every show is different. On Ghost, not as much. I talk to Wyclef 3 times a week on The Shy. On BMF, I talk to Michelle D'Ancello a lot. You know what I mean? On the 20s, I don't really speak to Amanda as much. You know, so every show is so different. And then we're just starting to spook the sub out of the door, and I'm a big fan of Robert Glasper's anyway. So once we actually get in the start, I'm going to be calling him anyway, just just cause. But I probably talk to the creators more than anything, you know, because they know the spine that the tone that they really want the show to sound like. I do deal with, like I said, I talk to Wyclef and those guys quite a bit. And it's more just, you know, when we're at our spotting sessions, and then we'll talk offline, like after a spot, like, hey, I'm going to give 2 alts for that. And since I speak music, I'll tell them, like, these will be in this key. This will be like, you know, around that tempo. And we can really kind of like marry the two as close as possible. So, you know, that's been great.
Luke, what was your experience working with director Neil Marshall on The Reckoning like? What was your collaborative process like?
You know, we hit it off straight away, actually. The first time I was finishing up a feature in Brazil, and I got an email on an old email account that I've not used for years. I saw Neil Marshall on the name, and I was like, not that Neil Marshall, and how did he get this email anyway? But then we kind of started emailing back and forth, and I read the script, I think 3 or 4 times before I went for the initial interview. And then as soon as we started talking, we got into the interview, and then we just kind of hit it off. We clearly had a lot of shared touch points in terms of the films that we liked. And I think, you know, my tastes kind of run from quite highbrow to quite lowbrow. You know, I like genre stuff, and I also like quite art house stuff. And Neil is like, he's just a walking encyclopedia of movies. It's absolutely bananas. So, you know, the amount of films that we covered just even in that first meeting. And when I went in for the initial interview, my kind of approach to the film was, I talked about maybe using the naturalism of something like The Revenant, which, you know, obviously they had the time to be able to wait exactly for the right light for each day and all that kind of stuff. And we didn't have that kind of thing, but we talked about embracing that degree of naturalism. And we actually ended up going in a slightly more expressionistic kind of way. So we ended up going more down the route of films like Macbeth or The Assassination of Jesse James, or even Excalibur, the early 80s film. Where the lighting and the look of it is a bit more expressionistic, and there's a bit more of that kind of mannerism going on rather than being so naturalistic. But yeah, we did a huge amount of research. The process was, I mean, Neil put together just a gigantic document with stills from, you know, every film that you can think of, and a bunch that I'd never even heard of, which was really interesting for me as well, because it just kickstarted such a massive research period before we got into the film. And then by the time we actually were shooting, the conversations that we're having were relatively minimal, because we kind of worked through everything. Neil doesn't shot list or storyboard. So, you know I've got to work a little bit quicker, because he likes to take a little bit more time just getting it all worked out with the actors and getting the blocking all done kind of on the day, and seeing what the actors are giving him organically and spontaneously, rather than having it all planned out. So, which again, that kind of worked great. I mean, we storyboarded, I think we might have storyboarded maybe a couple of scenes with a few more SFX, VisFX things. But generally, by the time we were getting there, the conversations were pretty minimal, because for each scene, we decided what kind of look we want. We knew where the inflection points were in terms of, you know, how the narrative is changing at this point and this point and this point. And so yeah, the process was very straightforward actually. Like no hissy fits, no screaming. It was all pretty calm.
Somebody got fired. That's always good. Well, I think that's it. I think that's a wrap on this panel. That was really fun. Thanks, you guys. I was stoked to get to be here and be a part of it. Thank you to Jana and Alex so much from Rhapsody PR for organizing this, and thank you all at home for watching.
Thanks.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.